Hello and welcome to the Monday Agenda. This is October, the month where we commemorate, we celebrate the life of our first founding father of the nation, the late Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. And this month, the Monday Agenda is dedicating towards remembering who really Mwalimu was for this and the coming generation. And with me on the program today is Mama Scholastica Kimario, who is the founder and CEO of Maadili Leadership Solutions, a person who has had a personal touch with Mwalimu. Mama Scholastica, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So before we pick up onto the program, let's understand first and foremost your background, and then we'll get onto the nitty-gritties on how you knew and how Mwalimu influenced your life and your being today.
You know, my background, my being here, my going to school beyond primary school was really very much credit to Mwalimu. So I'll start by saying I was born in a village called Maua on the slopes of Kilimanjaro in Kibosho. I was the second child of 6 kids of my father Joseph Naleo and Maria Josefa Naleo, and I was the first girl in our village to go to grade 5.
Wow.
Why? Because in my village, generally, and in my clan, we are Mushis. Mm-hmm. We are actually the ruling clan. But in those days, the chief did not believe that the children of the ruling clan should be taught by people other than themselves. Mm-hmm. And women in particular really had no business going to school. So it was really because of my mom that I was able to go to grade 5, but also because I never liked the way children and women were treated in my village. I could see that girls and boys were treated differently. I could see that women were treated very differently by men. And I also was living in a mud hut, you know, in those days. And every time I went to church, I could see that we have a beautiful church. It was built by the Germans. It's actually in the manner of a castle. Mm-hmm. And we used to have candles around the church. When there was mass, we had very nice floor and very nice desks. The priests, black and white, were living in nice houses, brick houses. The nuns were living there. There was actually a mission, a very big mission, missionary for seminarians, for training priests and actually nuns. So I could see that there were people who were black like me, who were living very well. And I thought, I want to live like that. So what will it take? So I could see the difference was actually their education. And whereas there were nuns who were not well educated, they tended to be in the kitchen and washing, doing house cleaning, and I didn't like that. So I was very much keen on education. So when I finished grade 4 and I passed, and I was selected for grade 5, I had to persuade my mother to find a way of persuading my father so that I could go to school. And him and his brothers and my uncles refused. So in the end, it was the priest, Father Babu, Joseph Babu, yes, who intervened. And really, he was very influential in making sure that young people generally and girls went to school. So when I got to Form 1, though, the school fees was 960 shillings. In those days, it was like, I don't know how many million shillings of today. Yeah. So my parents struggled to pay for me in Form 1. But by the time in 64 I was in Form 2, the school fees for secondary education were abolished. So people of my age who have gone to school, to university, honestly owed our education to Mwalimu's decision that school should be made available to any child who passed. Mm-hmm. And the other thing he did, you know, one of the things Mwalimu did was actually to, in the process, Kilimanjaro had a lot of schools, and there are many regions which did not have schools. So he also came with the policy that every school should only accept 20% of the children from that community.
Okay.
The rest have to come from the rest of the country. So he actually made it possible for children from all over the country to go to school, and made it possible for me to begin to meet children who were not Catholic, because
Okay.
I was brought up in Catholic schools, and also Muslim children, all kinds of children. So that already socialization of knowing that. In fact, the first time I saw Muslim girls, I was like, oh my goodness, they look like people. You know, the way I was brought up as a fundamentalist Catholic, I don't know what I thought they would look like, but you know, the prejudices.
Yes.
I was given the impression that only Catholics went to heaven. St. Peter's is making sure all the Protestants and everybody else does not go through the gate of
That's
heaven.
correct.
But because Mwalimu was a Catholic and he was tolerant, it really helped me to feel that it's okay to accept other people. That's not how I was brought up. So I started to experience Mwalimu from a very young age. So I went to university, and when I was at university, I started writing articles. My first degree was in home economics with education from Victoria Manchester University, but it was actually with the University of East Africa, Nairobi.
In Nairobi.
So I used to write stories about how modern home economics could help the Tanzanian women and children, and would actually send them to the party newspapers at the time, Uhuru, Mzalendo, Nationalist, and then I started publishing them. So by the time I finished university, I was actually assigned to go and teach at Changombe Teachers Training, but I was already offered a position as a features writer with the party newspapers, and then to train on the job as a journalist. So, and there is where my work as a journalist is really where I had very strong and very close contact with Mwalimu. He was very hands-on, because, you know, with us journalists in those days, the policy of the party newspapers was, you know, it was called a national papers for the people.
Okay.
So what journalism we practiced was actually development journalism. It was, yes, you reported on the facts, but then you at the end you had the opportunity to give it your own analysis to say how this is going to help or hinder development. When I look at journalism these days, I cry. But you know, it's how things are. But we were very disciplined. In fact, we looked at ourselves as cadres for moving forward the Mwalimu's agenda of Ujamaa, of self-reliance. He was very strong on promoting self-reliance. And many of us went either to Nairobi or to Makerere, and some went to Dar es Salaam, because then there was collaboration with the East African community, the three countries. So there used to be the airlines, East African Airlines, railways. You know, children from other countries would go. Tanzanians, 99% of us came back to build the nation. So we came back, we did national service. We were really, many of us, and speaking for myself, we were really mesmerized and captivated by Mwalimu, his vigor, his commitment to developing people, his ease of relating to people, and his honesty, you could see, and integrity was very attractive. So we felt that we were privileged to have gone to school. So after national service, you served for 5 years with a government institution. And then after that, you could serve anywhere you wanted. But many of us actually stayed. So it was only in 1978, you know, when we were actually also assigned by the central establishment manpower. You were assigned to a particular job according to your qualifications.
Correct.
We didn't actually go applying for jobs.
Okay.
The government knew who they had sent to school, what you went to learn, and where they were going to assign you. So after I joined then 71 is when I joined the Nationalist Uhuru and Mzalendo, on a regular basis.
Okay.
And then 72, when the government nationalized the organs of the mass media, especially Tanganyika Standard newspapers. Those of us who were considered more fluent in English were moved to the English papers.
Okay.
And then others were moved to the party newspapers, which remained primarily in Kiswahili. And during that time, Mwalimu would every so often would call us as journalists and talk to us. He would actually be able to critique, to say some of the things we've reported well and some of the things that we were not very clever at reporting. So he would say to us, for example, the other day I said so such and such was a mouse, and you guys said it was an elephant. So the day I said this is an elephant, what are you going to say? You know,
Okay.
So he taught us how to write simply without being simplistic. He really taught us many things. And whenever there was a matter of international importance or even regional importance, he would speak to us so that when we went to report on stories, we reported from a position of knowledge.
Correct.
So during the war with Idi Amin, I
Yes.
was still in the media. The whole nation was mobilized, and that is really something that Mwalimu knew to do, mobilizing the whole nation around an issue. So on the issue of the war with Idi Amin, everyone was focused on that, and we particularly as journalists, we actually had to be very level-headed, understand what was going on, that the war with Uganda was not really between Tanzania and Nyerere and Idi Amin. It was a war instigated primarily by the West, championed by UK.
Okay.
But using the mechanism of the Commonwealth.
Okay.
To be able to distract Mwalimu's attention. You know, he was then the chairperson of the frontline states, which were pushing for liberation. The liberation struggle.
Okay.
You know, for South Africa and Southern African countries to be free. And the Liberation Committee, the OAU Liberation Committee was hosted here with I think Major General Hashim Bita was the executive secretary. So Tanzania played a very key role in the struggle against apartheid because of Mwalimu's position also.
Okay.
So when we were reporting, we needed to understand that it really was nothing personal between Mwalimu and Idi Amin, but we were dealing with international and global politics. And so we were reporting responsibly. And some of our colleagues, my colleagues, actually went to the war front.
Okay.
So Mwalimu treated us as, you know, he saw leaders. He saw all of us as leaders. And he mobilized, we had the Youth League. He mobilized the women through the Women's League. Then we had the Parents Association. We had the Farmers Association. Basically, we are a peasant farming economy. And then he had... He made sure that people were also organized. You know, every 10 houses were a cell.
Okay.
So many cells were a zone. So many zones were a district, and the region, and up to national level. So the development of the country did not depend only on him,
Okay.
or on ministers, or on paid government officials or politicians. He made sure that the people made it their business.
Okay.
So all the time, we felt obliged to lead responsibly. And the one thing that I really think is important to mention, because of working with Nyerere, but also after that I went to work with the United Nations, first with UNICEF, the Children's Fund, and then with UNDP outside of the country. And looking back in retrospect, Mwalimu at the time was really the only president in Africa who went ahead to build national unity.
Okay.
How did he do it? First of all, the issue of prioritizing education. Not only did he promoted basic education, including adult education, he instituted the policy of universal primary education.
Okay.
He had adult education, he had farmers education, he had
Wow.
youth education, and they were text. And he actually did a lot of that. Mtu ni afya, maji ni uhai, talking about kilimo and all of these things. And he really stressed the issue of self-reliance. Also saying to people, you know, that business of tumeonewa ya kutosha, tumenyanyaswa, you know, we've been harassed and exploited, but our own weakness is what allowed this to happen. See, that was really very important for me, because it gave me a sense of self-confidence. And actually, many Tanzanians, and Mwalimu used to say to all of us as nationals, you know, let not anybody tell you that your value is according to what money you have in your pocket, what wealth you have, or what education you have.
Okay.
Each one of us has human dignity. And when you met Tanzanians outside, not only were we united because of Kiswahili,
Yes.
and Mwalimu insisting that we should not really promote tribalism, but there was this sense of personal pride,
Yes.
utu, dignity, you know. Sometimes Mwalimu would say, you guys, you know, maskini jeuri. But he encouraged us to have self-confidence. And really, that has taken me, you know, between being brought up as a fundamentalist Roman Catholic, I'm still now, and then meeting Nyerere, who was a Roman Catholic, who had a very broad, you know, political view and inclusive view. That really helped me. And whatever work I did, I always did in favor of the poor, the majority of whom are women and children. He really influenced my perception. He gave me a sense of self-confidence that anything is possible. Mwalimu he did not like to be bullied by the Western powers, and on a number of occasions, you know, he broke relations, for instance, with the British. Was it 65, 68? And he had this non-aligned movement position.
Yeah.
He tried to have relationships with all, you know, political affiliations, because he believed that in the inalienable goodness, you know, of every human being, and also our inalienable right to be able to live in peace and in equality. He did not want racism or gender discrimination or discrimination by religion. So I feel between my upbringing and being able to serve under President Nyerere, I felt very strongly centered on a work ethic, on a commitment to serve, on the art of possibility, you know, knowing how much he has worked, and he really was able. That's the other thing. He knew not only to make policies, but to make things happen.
Okay.
You know, there's a big difference between having a vision, having a plan, and then making that plan happen for people to see results. At a certain stage, Tanzania had the highest levels of adult literacy, for instance, you know. And people could read newspapers. People participated in party meetings. Although at another angle, the fact that he was able to penetrate the whole of society was good in making sure everybody was involved. But with time, people used our own traditional ways of democracy to actually using the party positions. People began, in our culture, if I'm senior than you, you are supposed to respect me.
Correct.
You know, the way you greet me, you don't contradict me. Even if you have a better view than me, you don't say it. So with time, we found that the party leadership from the very bottom level, all the way up. With time, as I look back, those are some of the things that, one, I thank Mwalimu for. And I must say, I'm also excited to see what the current government is doing, and President Magufuli's own commitment, you know, to bring change. Change is not easy. If you've been to school, you know how often school children, if the porridge was not did not have enough sugar, the children would go on the street.
Correct.
So to work now in this fifth, yes, to actually change things from how corrupt we had all become to bring discipline, it requires not only commitment, it really requires moral courage.
Correct.
And emotional fortitude. So I observe how President Magufuli is working, and I can see the challenges, but I'm also motivated to see his commitment. You know, in my working with the United Nations in issues of governance, I came to realize that there are two kinds of commitment to development, especially of the poor. There is what I call the chicken commitment to breakfast.
Okay.
And then
Chicken
commitment to breakfast,
okay.
And the pig commitment to breakfast.
All right.
You see, for you and I to have breakfast with eggs, the chicken only has to lay the egg. But for you and I to have bacon for breakfast,
yes,
the pig has to lay down its life.
Correct.
So it takes a great deal of commitment to do actually what the current president is doing. And he always asks us for our prayers, and he certainly has my prayers.
Okay.
Because I also know in my work experience what it takes to actually try to make a difference, and the fact that if you if you don't stay focused, it won't happen.
Okay.
And if you stay focused, you know, it will happen, but then you don't expect credit. Credit means you are satisfied that you actually have made a commitment to make sure your life makes a difference. So I find that actually quite motivating.
Okay.
And it reminds me of some of the things that Mwalimu used to promote, and that I used to feel comfortable to be able to serve under a leader who the direction is known, and the results are known, and also there were consequences if you did not do that which was expected. So these are some of the initial thoughts I can share in terms of how I remember Mwalimu and how I'm very grateful to him. In fact, if it wasn't for him, many of us who were children of ordinary people would never have gone to school beyond primary school.
Okay. On top of that, you know, Mwalimu was a man of principles. And I'm very certain that these principles, also you've mentioned a few, are the ones that made Tanzania where we are today.
Yes.
And as a man of principle, how would you describe Mwalimu?
You know, first of all, because Mwalimu had certain principles, it was known nationally and globally that he was committed to fighting for the rights of the poor. It was known that he believed in egalitarianism, you know, at least a certain degree. To reduce the class divisions. He wanted to develop everybody to the extent possible to have equitable access to the nation's resources.
Correct.
It was also for this reason that he fought very hard, actually, to protect the land, so that you couldn't own land in his time. You could be given access for so many 33 years. You could build a house, but the land did not belong to you. It belonged to the people. He used to be very keen on saying that, you know, these guys are actually exploiting us. He used to talk how, you know, in a certain time period, we would produce so many tons of sisal in order to get one tractor. And as time goes on, we would just have to more and more for the same tractor. He was very keen not to actually begin with mineral exploitation until he used to say, let's wait until our grandchildren or great-grandchildren have gone to school, have got that knowledge and skills. The minerals will not rot. These are not carrots or potatoes. They will be there. He was very keen to actually protect the national resources, which we lost when we were forced to liberalize. And I say forced, quite quite seriously, because, you know, in my work with the United Nations, I'm very aware of the fact that, in fact, in retrospect, by the time the colonized countries were given independence, it was really flag independence.
Okay.
But the so-called international community, our former colonizers, had worked out the economic relations between countries in such a way that, in fact, they gave us the responsibility to govern, but they still hold the money. Not only hold it, you know, and we, in fact, when I was working with UNICEF in the late 70s, UNICEF did studies, and even the money that comes through the United Nations, which is supposed to be grant money.
Yes.
You know, and this thing of calling people donors, in fact, we are the donors. Seriously.
We are the donors.
Seriously. Because there is information showing that for every $100 that we are given, hardly 10 remain here in the country. And more recently, you know, the AU or AU has actually commissioned a study which was chaired by the former President Mbeki.
Okay.
And it has been published to show the illicit flows of money from Africa. It's amazing how many billions of dollars Africa is robbed, you know, through unfair trade, through not paying taxes, through not declaring the truth about the minerals that the things that Magufuli has been fighting here. These are real challenges, you know, and there is data to show that, in fact, these countries giving us a certain amount of money, it's really not about us. It's for them to maintain access to our countries.
Okay.
And Mwalimu was very keen about that. And although there were those who blamed him for being too conservative, when you look at how much exploitation has happened of Tanzania right now, when you look who is actually controlling the economy, in fact, apart from multinational organizations, South African companies, you see, we supported the struggle against apartheid, and you know, following Mwalimu's lead, not because, you know, it was actually for a selfish vested interest, because Mwalimu used to say, when your neighbor's house is thatched house is under fire, you should go and help him, because when his is done, it will be yours.
It will definitely be yours, yes.
So this is why we supported the struggle against apartheid, because, and Mwalimu was very instrumental actually in the establishment of the OAU, which later on became AU. The idea being that with people like Nkrumah and Abdel Nasser and I forget who else, you know, they realized that flag independence is not enough.
Okay.
We needed the whole continent to get flag independence. Then we can begin to work for economic emancipation. When the last country to become independent in Southern Africa was actually South Africa. And interestingly, the minute that happened, they forgot about now joining hands with us to fight for economic emancipation. And the people who didn't fight for freedom in South Africa, you know, the companies, are the ones which came back into our countries and took over our economies. Look who has the banks, you know, who has the mines, who has even the tourism. And you know, so when I actually see, like in South Africa, you know, black people fighting against Africans north of the Limpopo, it's very clear that somehow once freedom was had, there wasn't the continuation. One thing Mwalimu used to do was political education. Our people, especially the young people, there's no political education these days. This issue of, you know, so-called multi-party democracy does not really result in political pluralism.
Correct.
All it does is to make us fight each other. You know, father against son, where I come from in Rombo, where I am married, and where I'm now coming from. You know, there was an instance where the father was a leader of one party and the son was a leader of another party. And you know, the father said to him, "You have really gone against me. And from now on, you are no longer my son. If I die, don't come to my funeral, and I will not come to your funeral."
Wow.
So you can see the extent to which, you know, this thing of called, Mwalimu used to say, let's be a one party. We will know each other, you know, inside we know ourselves, but we need to build national unity. But came a time when it was no longer possible to hold that view together. We were under so much pressure.
External pressure.
External pressure, yeah. But in my experience, working for 30 years with the United Nations in different countries, I cannot give you one example where political pluralism has actually happened in the way it is supposed to happen. And I'm actually praying that with time, Tanzanians will wake up and we can reclaim. You know, what Mwalimu stood for was actually, there was a political ideology. If you ask me today, what is the political ideology of the different parties, I couldn't tell you. Maybe I have an idea of what CCM stood for, because from my youth, actually, I was in the party. My uncles, my mother's younger brothers, were the ones who were activists. So that's how I joined from when I was small. We used to be called Chipukizi, you know, below 15. So I have actually been in the political system, you know, with TANU and with CCM. I'm a founder member of CCM. I don't necessarily involve myself actively now that I'm retired with the party affairs, but I very much believe in the founding ideas of Mwalimu, which he was the founding father of the principles of the ruling party. But I think somewhere along the lines, you know, we as a nation are losing, because there's so much noise, political noise, that there isn't a focus to say what is the national agenda. And for me, I believe in the, you know, multi-party system. But it only works when, first of all, as a nation, we have a national agenda. Which we
currently do not have.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, in my observation, you know, a good system where you have multi-party democracy, you should have a national agenda whereby each party has to actually commit to do these things. There should be a moral minimum. Every party should do it. And then if any party which goes above that, then that becomes the credit on the basis of which they should be seeking, you know, votes from the citizens. But then that demands that citizens also understand politics. And when I grew up, when we went to school, we had civics. We learned about civics in school. We were very much, I mean, there was even Bible knowledge. We even had this, you know, what would I call it? Not just current affairs. We were involved, even as school children and as youth. We actually were involved in the political life of the nation. So we participated from a position of knowledge. In fact, when I served as a journalist, some of us felt we were more knowledgeable and committed to Jamaa than the politicians themselves.
Of course, you're the first persons to, you know, receive the cream of the news. So you definitely receiving and disseminating.
But also it was a matter of commitment. You know, I don't believe that I supported Mwalimu just because he was Mwalimu, but it's what he stood for. You see, so and that requires to have active, you know, multipartyism, which actually works, demands that every person should know politics. I have high hopes for Tanzania. You know why? Because, you know, it's interesting. I was away for 35 years. I came back 3 years ago to Tanzania. And one thing I realized is that, you know, everybody and their grandmother knows about football, knows about sports, and they have teams they support, including international teams. And when the game is being played, they will say, yeah, this one, no, he didn't do it. He should have done this. What does that mean? They understand sports. Now, I would encourage Tanzanians to understand politics in the same way that we understand sports. But for that to happen, I would also call on our politicians to put time aside of partisanship to actually educate people about common issues of common interest, so that at least we are pulling in the same direction. The way we are pulling now, I mean, we are even making it very easy for outside people to exploit us. Okay. Because when you are not, and national unity is another thing that Mwalimu fought for. Now, right now, national unity is something that has become aspirational.
We are going to go onto the national unit. My dear viewers, you're watching the Monday Agenda, and with me is Mama Scholastica Kimario, who is the founder and CEO of Maadili Institute. But we're looking onto how she personally knew and experienced Mwalimu, as we are dedicating the programs, these 4 programs for this month, to remember Mwalimu. It's been 20 years since he passed on, but the legacy lives on. And you're just about to introduce another topic, but prior to that, I would really wish to understand. Mwalimu was a visionary leader. I cannot mention the likes of Arusha Declaration. I cannot mention prior to that the union between Tanganyika and Zanzibar. You would. It's difficult for a young person of my age and younger to even imagine how would someone come with an idea of uniting nations, being one country, one powerful nation, Arusha Declaration, and many other visions that Mwalimu had. 1961, when Mwalimu announced the 3 enemies of the state, yes. I'm contemplating and wish really I had more time to even had a session with Mwalimu himself, just to understand things. But as visionary as he was, how do I, young person today, honor the legacy of Mwalimu? Yes.
First of all, you can't honor what you don't know. So, and I am happy to know that there is a Mwalimu Nyerere Foundation. I have not understood well enough what they do to actually be able to comment on the impact, but I think the youth demand from us as older people and as politicians and as leaders, as parents, they need to know.
And I've asked that because, many of us now, the young people, are in power.
Yes.
Power in the national parliament, yes. Power in the offices, powers to influence, powers in the media, fraternity. We give the statements, yes. In media houses, and media draws attention to what we say.
Yes.
But recent past, not just the 20 years after Mwalimu, but in the recent past, I've not personally felt if we truly have, what Mwalimu would have admired, what Mwalimu would have wanted to see for the coming generations.
I really would hope that as we remember Nyerere, some of the values that he stood for would be something that every political party would reflect on. Not because he was CCM, but because he was a man of principle and a founder of this. His bones must be rattling in his grave. We've lost the national plot. What is the national agenda? In what way is the ruling party and each individual party actually fulfilling that?
Yes.
And then to also have a commitment to making people accountable. Why is Magufuli a bad man when he says, you are not doing the right thing, go?
Yeah.
We should be supporting that.
Absolutely.
And in fact, something that Mwalimu had done was to make sure that citizens knew, if you were the doctor or the nurse in that hospital, they knew that you were answerable to them, not the other way around. Right now, we've become fans of our politicians. We are, fun. You just go and celebrate. But you have to take your politicians to be accountable.
Absolutely.
So the lessons that Mwalimu taught, which really, as we remember him 20 years on, we need to look to see which lessons did he teach us that made Tanzania great. Even though we did not have money, Tanzania, we would go to international meeting. When Nyerere was there, he got the respect. After that, we started to lose, credibility. And that shows that something needs to be done. So I would call on all of us to really study and see what did Nyerere stand for.
Okay.
In why is he an important person? Do you know that the Catholic Church was actually considering making him a saint? And that shows that although there were those who did not like him because he was fighting for our rights,
Yes.
but there are also those who knew that he was actually doing something very important. He was a man of principle, a man of integrity, a holy man. And yeah, we have a lot to learn if we want to make changes. But if we just want to forget history and fight in the open market without knowing the rules of the game, then we will be responsible for the consequences.
You were watching the Monday agenda. We're coming to the end of the program. Sadly, I would spend an entire afternoon or an entire evening or an entire day just to contemplate on to Mwalimu, because the more you speak of Mwalimu, the more you gather the wisdom this man had. And as it was said to Mandela, there's only one Mandela in the century. I'm saying there's only one Mwalimu in 10 centuries. And we were most privileged by God, certainly, to have had Mwalimu as not only the founder, but the first president, Tanzanian. He's seen many African nations gain their independence and so forth. We're happy today, as peaceful nation as it is, because of the principles, because of the, because of how he nurtured us to what we are today. I'm recalling to my last remark his statement during the inaugural parliamentary speech back in December 62, that he asked the parliamentarians, what type of a nation, what kind of nation do you want to focus building on? Do you want to build skyscrapers? Do you want to build roads, massive roads? You want to bring industries and stuff? He said, no, let's focus on our people.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that, I contemplate every day on this speech, and I say, wow, as visionary, we are really privileged as Tanzanians. My dear viewers, you're watching the Monday Agenda. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mama Kimario. You want to?
Finish,
Yes.
Can I say something as we end? I would like to end by saying, you mentioned the three enemies of the nation that Mwalimu focused on: poverty, ignorance, and disease. I want to remind all of us that even 10 years after his passing, this country is still afflicted by poverty, ignorance, and disease. We may have more schools, but we don't have better education.
Correct.
We may have ways of extracting mineral wealth and a lot of money, but people are not yet wealthy. People are not yet, and the issue of disease, the disease burden is actually not only increasing, but also more complex. You now have the non-communicable diseases, which have become the diseases of the millennium.
Yeah.
And that is actually the reason why when I retired from the United Nations at age 60, I went back to school to learn about mind-body energy medicine, because I really believe that, Mwalimu used to say, mtu ni afya.
Yeah.
I honestly learned that your health determines your ability to lead. And when you are not well, when the degree of your wellness or lack thereof determines how well you are able to lead. And I took that one thing to say, mtu ni afya. My commitment and that of the Maadili Leadership Solutions is actually to show the relationship between health and wellness on the one hand and leadership ability. So at least I have taken one area of Mwalimu's commitment to continue to work on that. And I would like to invite others, if each one of us makes a difference, if each one of us, forget parties, if each one of us actually decided this is something Mwalimu was promoting for national unity and the benefit of the people, I am going to make a commitment to do this. We will make much more progress than depending only on the party or on government. I think each one of us, we need to start to practice self-reliance and to do things, not just wait for government or the party, but also to, to kuwajibika, to be accountable, to be responsible.
I'm your host, Austin Makani. Until next time, let's honor and carry forward the legacy that Mwalimu left behind. Thank you.